Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am recording this one, so did anybody have a chance to look at the video at all? Okay, I did post the video. It links you to a YouTube video of the session, and it's me kind of in and out and all over the place, and there's stuff over here and there's stuff over here that you can't even see because it's not really mobile. So if you get a chance, or if there's something that you think I need to hear that again, then you can definitely go in and you can watch the videos. You guys will be using your computers today, so if you want to go ahead and get those fired up, you definitely can. But I also need you to listen. So I'm going to answer any questions that you have so far. We're going to just briefly touch on the practice assignment, and then I have another detail to that you will add before you turn it in. And then you're actually going to get your rhetorical analysis assignment. So I'm going to give you your assignment because I want you guys to start thinking about which choice you're going to make and thinking about all of the elements there. When you look at the assignment, we're going to start talking about research methods. So we're going to get in there and we're really going to focus on how to get into the research. We're not going to focus on documenting the research yet. We're going to do that later on. But right now we're going to get in there and look at what kind of research should I be looking at. And we're going to focus specifically on the virtual library. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to answer any questions that you guys may have over what we discussed, over the idea of analysis, over the idea of rhetoric, or the idea of a rhetorical analysis. So what questions do you guys have in general? Everybody feels like, yeah, I can totally write this. Okay, that didn't sound very positive. Nate, did you have anything specific?
I don't know. Seeing examples, I guess, would be nice.
Okay. So I have done a rhetorical analysis of Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel's piece, so I can actually use that and show you guys that as we go through the pieces, so you can see with a common element what that actually entails. So let me find that now, and then I'll show you guys. As I'm finding that, I do need you guys to get your assignment out. So if you could go ahead and get your assignment out, then we will talk about that as well. Oh, this is even better. This is a student's paper. So this is a student's paper over, it's her rhetorical analysis over Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel's piece. So it was in APA, so you'll, oh, no, that's not it. Just kidding. So many examples, so many really great things. Here it is. And this was an online class, so online classes are just weird. So this student, she has her introduction. She brought in some research from a sign, or this is the source that talks about the sign that stands at where Bergen-Belsen is. So she brings in something interesting, something unique. She goes on to talk about Menkel and what she does. She is focusing on her imagery, her language, and her tone. So she's going to focus in on those really small, minute details. So she talks a little bit about Menkel's use of pathos, and this is slightly differently structured. The language that is used, and the imagery there. So this is one example of a student really focusing in on the context. And she's really looking at the use of language in the piece. Let me see if I can find another example here. I know I have one somewhere. Okay, I'll have to find my example. I don't want to take up too much time with this. I'll find my example and then I'll post my example as you guys are doing the pieces. So when you guys do your thesis and outline, I have a thesis and outline and I'll post that. When you guys do your first draft, I'll post my first draft. So you guys will see something in comparison. I just don't want you guys to get stuck in looking at the example and thinking that's a formula that I have to use. It's not formulaic, so you don't have to use it in the exact same formula. It just gives you a guide that you can use, that you can go by. Okay, I'll work on that. Any other questions? Not yet. All right, let's talk a little bit about your practice assignment. So we looked at Yasir Ballou's The Right to Be Fully American. Which areas did you struggle in the most? How many of you struggled finding the purpose? Okay. How many of you struggled with analyzing the author?
I did.
Okay. And what did you struggle with specifically?
The analyzing.
Okay. So a little trick to analyzing is if you make a list of all of the things that you think are important, then sometimes that will help you come up with an analysis based on that information. I like lists. If you look in my office was strategically placed with a bunch of Post-its on my desk because that's how I kind of stay organized. So if you make a list of all of the things that you find are significant about the author, then you can use that for analysis. So what are some important details about Yasir Ballou? What are some important facts about him? Evidence from the story.
He's a lawyer.
Okay.
He's educated.
Okay. Is that in the story?
Yeah.
What does it say in the story specifically?
Attorney.
Okay. So that doesn't say that he's educated. It just says that he's an attorney, a lawyer.
Well, at the end of the story in the little box, it says he knows 4 languages. And kind of proves it.
That's the evidence that will show the claim to be true. The analysis can be that he's educated, and then these are the examples. So remember that CER that we did before? You start wherever you're at. So if you have the evidence from the story, this is all the evidence. And then this could be your claim, that he's educated, he's well educated. Or you could even say he's really intelligent. Well, what shows that he's intelligent? He's, not only is he a lawyer, what kind of lawyer is he?
Sorry.
Is it, what is it? It's something in Miami. So go.
Commercial litigation.
Okay, so commercial litigation. Do you know what commercial litigation is? Okay, he deals with rich people and he defends their abilities to commercialize ideas. So he's going to work for people like Disney. He's going to work for cruise lines. He's going to work for people who have a lot of money to pay him. So he's a commercial litigation lawyer. He speaks 4 languages. Okay? What else?
Muslim.
Okay, does that show that he's educated or does that show something else?
His
Good.
religion.
So he's Muslim.
He's an American citizen.
Okay. So would that be here? Would that be here? Where is that? Is there going to be a new category? Let's just make a list. So he's American. He's an American citizen. He is Pakistan born.
He lived in Los Angeles.
Okay. So he's lived in LA. Where else?
Florida.
Where else? Well, he was born in Pakistan. So we could use this information to say what about him?
He's traveled.
Okay. Maybe he's well traveled. So whether you have the evidence first and then you supply the analysis based on that evidence, or whether you automatically come up with some analysis and then you go back and supply the evidence, either way is going to work. So point out the things in the story that are significant to know about him. And this is where that annotating really comes into effect. So you want to go in and you want to underline those things that you think right away, hey, that's important, that's cool, that's something that I should know. You want to go in there and you want to do that right away. Arlene, does that help a little?
Yes.
Okay. So who struggled with the audience section? Okay. And why did you struggle with the audience section? Was it for this same reason? Or was it because you didn't know who the audience was?
Pretty much all I got was educated Americans.
Okay. And what evidence do you have for that?
The fact that they can read,
Mm-hmm.
and that's about it.
Okay.
Oh, well, then you could say, well, now that you told me what commercial litigation was.
So that might have been an area that you needed to research more. So what did you do for areas that you needed to research more? Yep, you put that asterisk next to it. So if that's an area that you need to research even more, that's okay. We have talked a little bit in here about NPR. We've talked a little bit about Newsweek. That may have been a day that you weren't here, or maybe you were focused on something else. So maybe you missed that information. So you would just have to go back and you would have to supply that information. Some of you already knew what NPR was, so you already had a fairly good understanding of what an NPR viewer is going to be like. So you could already make some quick assumptions. But for most of you, you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to figure those things out. So use the evidence that proves that he's talking to educated Americans. If you think that there's another subcategory that he's talking to, then just use the evidence from there. But if you're missing that information, make a list of what you have, and that would go under the proof. Make a list of what you have. If you can't come up with analysis, then that would be something that you would put an asterisk next to. Good. Did anybody struggle with the context? I was afraid I was going to see hands on this. Okay. So the context area of the piece, again, you're starting with initial claims, so you are coming up with some kind of claims. Did anybody struggle with figuring out the main idea? Okay. The medium, was that the area many of you struggled with? I know a few of you struggled with the medium, a few of us have talked about that. So the medium is how you take in the information. So it was written in a book with chapters. Now, I know that seems kind of remedial, but why does that make an impact? Why does it make an impact that you read something from a book that has chapters? Why does that matter?
Depends on my style of book though too.
Okay, let's go here first. So it typically means that you're educated if you have purchased a book. My almost husband, he will tell anybody and everybody who asks. He has read one book, and it was a library book, and it was a novella. He doesn't say novella because he doesn't know. But it was a really, really small book. That is the only book he's ever, and it was like about, I don't know, Ruby Payne or something like that. That is the only book he's ever read in his entire life. He is not a well-educated man. Very nice man, very smart in other areas, but he is not a book man. So just the fact that it comes from a book that you have to purchase or that you would purchase says something about the audience. They understand how to get their resources. They understand where resources are going to come from. They understand the structure of a book. Now it may seem very remedial, but at the same time it shows accuracy. Somebody who is going to purchase a book, whether they have to or not, you guys kind of had to, they're going to purchase a book, they understand their resources. Courtney?
Where I kind of stumbled on that, I got book, obviously, but I
Mhm.
wasn't for sure if we had to put NPR too from where they got it from.
So NPR collected these into a book. So for your purposes, you can focus on the fact that it is a book. But that is an important note to make. That originally this book is a collection of articles from NPR that were produced originally with NPR. So that's an important note to make, because that then in turn tells you something about the type of publication, the genre. So this is a more sophisticated personal philosophy essay. How do I know it's a personal philosophy essay? Says it on the title. That's a big clue. What else? Anything else tell me that it's a personal philosophy essay?
No.
He talks about himself. He talks about his own ideas and ideologies. You can also look through the book itself and you can see other personal philosophies. You can see other people's ideas and personal beliefs. So the genre is going to be very, very specific. The medium is going to be a bit more broad, a bit more general. But those things come into play when you're talking about the use of ethos, logos, and pathos, sometimes when you're talking about audience. This is the other thing I want you guys to keep in mind. This isn't the order that everything has to go in. So some of your articles or some of your papers, you may want to focus on context first, and then focus on author and then audience. Some of you may want to focus on audience first, and then author, and then context. Everybody's structure is going to be slightly different based on the way that you're presenting the information. So this isn't the way it has to go in your essay. This is just how I put it together. I think I did. Nope, I didn't do alphabetical order, so I would have thought I did, but I didn't. What about culture? How many of you struggled in that area specifically? Okay, that's awesome. So any other questions over this? Any other struggles on this? So what I want you to do now, the last step of this, is to actually turn this over, and on the back side of this, I want you to write the areas that you need to research. So if you need to research the Quran, if you need to research Pakistan, if you need to research NPR, whatever those things are, I want to see a list of the areas that you would need to research. So whatever you have an asterisk next to. If you have no asterisks, this is my stern teacher look. You should have asterisks. You should have areas that you need to investigate a little bit more. And even if you think, oh, I understand this, I get the analysis, come up with some areas that you could dive into even more to understand. If it's something that we talked about as a whole class, so you understand it because we talked about it as a whole class, then you would have originally needed to research that. So add that to the list.
You have one of those ice coffees.
I try to. I love them.
I used to be like that with the caramel frappe.
Oh, so good. Okay, once you're finished with that, I want you to drop it off at the back. Make sure your name's on it and drop it off at the back next to the sign-in sheet.
Oh, my goodness.
Nate's allergic to us.
It's like genetic. My dad's sneezes like 18 times in a row.
My mom did that.
You're talking about the list, or you're talking about the whole assignment?
The whole assignment with the list.
These, right?
Yep. Make sure your name is on it.
You have a staple. I don't want to use the forms.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Like the air comes back.
What?
Like the air comes
Yes. Keith doesn't need it. All right, we are going to go ahead and go over the actual assignment. So let's go ahead and look at the assignment itself. And as we go through this, I will explain what you're going to be doing. At the end of this part, I do want you guys to write some important dates down. If you have an agenda book of some kind, you'll need to mark these important dates on your agenda book. And then I will give you what your options are. So the first part of this is the introduction. The introduction just explains that basically you're looking at how an author relates to the audience to create a powerful text. So again, this doesn't mean that they're trying to necessarily persuade. Sometimes they're just trying to modify the perspective of the audience. So they're trying to get them to understand where they're coming from. In this instance, all of your pieces are persuasive pieces. So all of your pieces, all of your options are meant to persuade the audience. So the assignment, for this assignment, you're going to write a rhetorical analysis of one of the 3 pieces that you have the option of. So you only have 3 options. You're going to choose one of those options. You are going to first figure out what the author's point is. What is the purpose? What purpose is the author trying to get across to the audience? And then you're going to start analyzing each of those areas. So you're going to analyze the author, you're going to analyze the audience, you're going to analyze the context. And you're going to figure out what appeals did the author use. So you're going to look at, did the author use primarily ethos, primarily logos, primarily pathos? Did they use another one as well as that one, or did they use all 3? Now what's the best plan for an author? To use which one? All 3. Really the best idea is to use all 3. But authors can't always use all 3. Which one of those, ethos, logos, or pathos, is the most dangerous to use? Pathos. And why is pathos? Why is the emotional appeal most dangerous?
Because you can risk the chance of putting down.
Okay, so one part of that is that you risk really exposing your own emotions and then getting your emotions kind of stomped on. So that's one risk. What's another risk?
Not everybody feels the same way as you do.
Good. Not everyone is going to feel the same way that you do, so you risk turning off that audience or making the audience not care. So which one of those is the most culturally dependent? Ethos, logos, or pathos?
What do you mean?
Logos?
Logos. Why logos?
Because it's logic, so not every culture has the same logic.
Okay. When we're thinking of logos, we want to think of logic, and when we think of logic, we want to think of justness, so justice and laws specifically. So our laws even vary state to state. We ride motorcycles, so we love Indiana because we don't have to have a helmet, but then we go to other states and you have to have a helmet. So the law in Indiana says one thing and we support that, but then we go to the next state over and the law is different. So laws are going to vary, and that is very dangerous. So you have to be very cautious with that, especially in different cultures. State to state is one thing, but culturally, that becomes a really big deal. So the one that is the easiest to rely on is actually ethos. And ethos is the one that will allow you to embed the research. So the research will allow you to gain ethos as an author, because the ethos is the credibility. So what are the areas that we really focus on with credibility? We want someone who has education and experience. So the best experts are going to have both, but sometimes they need one over the other. So an instance where they need experience over education is what? What's that? Anybody. How would we trust in somebody who has experience over education?
They're gonna do it.
I think of like when you're in the military, there's
Mhm.
a lot of officers that go to school to train for warfare.
Okay.
But if you and your platoon were going into warfare, you wouldn't want an officer over like a master sergeant who has experience, maybe like a Vietnam veteran or
Good.
somebody that has actual experience with it.
So in the military, you definitely want somebody who has experienced it, and some of that is related. So the training is an education of sorts, but it's really getting in there, and you want to trust in people who've had more experiences, definitely in the military. When might you trust education over the experience?
Like in a technical law school aspect.
Okay, so what kind of field?
Teacher.
Okay, a teacher. Oftentimes teachers who are new, who are fresh, those are employed more highly over somebody who has experience. Good.
People who deal with computers.
Okay, technology, definitely. Technology changes so often and so fast, so they want somebody who has a really great education over their experiences. Good. So the idea here is that you are going to do this with one of the 3 options that you have, which I'll give you in just a minute. Your criteria is that this is worth 100 points. There are going to be pieces that build up to that large component. The assignment that you just turned in, that's the practice activity for this assignment. So you have a lot of little assignments along the way for this essay. It's going to be 1,250 to 1,500 words. It is going to be an MLA. So you're no longer going to have that year after the author's name, so that's going to discount from your word count. So for some of you, that's going to be sad. Some of you, that's going to be better, because you won't have to focus on that. It needs to have critical thinking. So you need to really think about the author. You really need to think about the audience. I want you guys to think deeply about these areas. You are going to have one primary source, and then you're going to have 2 additional sources. So the primary source is going to be the video itself, and then the 2 additional sources are going to be the research that you start looking at today. The backside shows that the essay is going to be worth 100 points. You can look at the different areas. I want to focus with you on the due dates. So you guys are going to have 3 options. With those 3 options, by this Saturday, 11:59 this Saturday, you need to email me your first, second, and third choice of those options. Now, you're not necessarily going to get your first choice. You may get your second, and some of you may end up with your third. But you're going to choose, this is the order that I would like to do these in. This is my favorite, this is my next favorite, this is my least favorite. You need to send me that email by Saturday at midnight. I am going to put you guys in groups, and those groups are what area you're going to be focused on. So you will start researching over break. You're going to do some research, and you're going to come up with a couple of articles. So your research is going to be due March 16th. When you come back on March 16th, you need to have at least 2 pieces of research. 2 to 3 pieces of research. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a few minutes. During class time on the 16th, you guys are going to get into your groups, and you guys are actually going to share your research. You're going to share what you found from the research with the rest of your group. That day, you guys are going to have some guided discussion. So I have a questionnaire. You guys are going to have conversations. So it's not going to be, I'm getting into my group and we're going to talk about what we did over spring break. That's not going to work. So you have guided discussion questions that will be due at the end of the class. That group work will help you in analyzing who your audience actually is. So I'll explain this more on the 16th, and you will have an audience analysis for your audience, for your paper, that is going to be due on the 18th. So you guys can mark out the 17th, 19th, 24th, 26th, 31st, and 2nd. Those are my Tuesday dates. So the 23rd, the thesis and outline is due by class time, and during that class session, we're going to work on your works cited page. So we're going to talk about works cited. We're going to play around with that. I'm going to show you guys an easier format for you to introduce your source, cite your source, and then explain your source. So we'll talk a little bit more about that then. On the 25th, I have you guys doing group peer reviews. Now you guys are doing the group peer reviews based on your first draft. So what usually happens, your group usually has one person who is completely clueless, one person who understands it and does pretty well, and then other people who are, okay, I get this part of it, but I don't get this part of it. So when you get together in your group, oftentimes everybody reads the other person's paper and they say, oh, I get it now. this makes more sense now. Oh, I get this section now. Oh, I think I did this right now. So you're going to see things in that group peer review that I want you to use for your paper. So your first draft, to me, is not going to be due until the 28th, which is a Saturday. So you're going to turn it in by 11:59, but that gives you a few days from your peer review to fix that draft before you submit it to me. I am going to conference with you one-on-one on the 30th. So that will be a day that your attendance and your 20 points for the conference depend on you being at that conference. You will sign up for those times on the 25th. Also due that day will be your peer review. So you're going to do your peer review on the 25th, but it's not going to be due until you conference with me. April 1st, your final essay will be due. We have a little bit of flexibility if we need to move things around, but I'd really like to stick to this schedule so we can get into the next paper. The final paper is a lot. It's worth a lot of points. It's worth 200 points for just the final essay, and it's really big. So I want us to get into it as soon as possible. So for your options, you guys have 3 videos that you will be able to choose from. Now, out of those 3 videos, again, you are going to choose your first, second, and third choice. Now, what I suggested to my class earlier was that you guys actually take the practice activity that you did, and you use that practice activity to isolate what you feel about each of these areas or each of these pieces. So the first option is a frontline option. So you take this and you start filling it in as you're watching the video. None of the videos are more than like 18 minutes. I think the longest one is an 18-minute one. Nate?
Who does the front line video on this one?
Muhammad Ali. It's written there. So all of the authors, reporters are listed here. So the first one is Muhammad Ali's Frontline piece. The second one is Tanya Hamilton's Good Country People. The third is a TED Talk. So for those of you who know what TED Talks are, you're probably going to go straight to that one. The TED Talk is a different audience from the other 2. So you are going to review these videos. And again, I would suggest that you fill in this information as you're going through and reviewing the videos. So review the videos and decide which one you want to do first, which is your favorite, which is your second favorite, and which is your least favorite. And then you are going to send me those options by Saturday. On the back side of this, you're going to see the rubric. This is how you're going to be graded. There is little that goes into the grammar and punctuation, so I wouldn't focus so much on it. A lot will go into your research. So you see that 15 points are for your in-text citations and works cited page. And then 10 points are for the integration of research. So far that's 25 points for the research. You have 5 points for your primary source, 5 for each secondary source. So 15, 25, 35, 40 points. 40% of this essay is just on the research. So this is really heavy on the research part. I also want to see that you're using the sections about the author, the context, and the audience. I also want to hear about ethos, logos, and pathos. So I need to see those things in your essay. Questions so far? The videos are hyperlinked on the possibilities. So when you guys go into Blackboard, and I don't think I have Blackboard up. When you guys go into Blackboard, you're going to see there's a possibilities and rubric. You guys are going to open that, and then you can hyperlink. You can access the hyperlinks here. The first one and the last one both have transcripts available. So if you'd like to see something, you want to physically see something that you can write on, then you can access the transcripts. If you really want to use something that you have a transcript for because you need that linguistic component, let me know that when you email me, and I'll make sure I put you in one of those 2 groups. So just like the assignment that you just did, you're going to have gaps. You're going to review these pieces and you're going to go, okay, I think I understand this, or I don't understand this at all. So you're going to have some gaps that you need to fill in. And that's where the research is going to come in. So the research is really to support the author, and you in this instance are one of the authors. You're writing about an author, but you are an author. It helps you think outside of yourself. So oftentimes we go in thinking, I know everything about this topic. If you think you know everything about the topic, then that's not the topic for you, because you have to have research in this. So pick one that you will be able to research because you don't fully understand. One requirement of this is that you go against your culture. Now, I don't think anybody here is from Syria, from Jamaica, or from Pakistan. Okay, so you guys don't have any problems. You should be able to choose any of these. When you're choosing, choose the one that is most appealing to you, if possible. But if you think after you review it, hey, I know this, and hey, I know a lot about what's going on in Syria, and hey, I know a lot about what's going on in Pakistan, don't choose that piece. Because again, you're not reporting on what's going on in the video. Your information, your whole goal is to present how the author is successful or unsuccessful in persuading the audience. So please, and I will say this over and over again, you are not giving me a report on what's going on in Syria. I know what's going on in Syria. I watch the news sometimes. And I've read this piece, or I've watched this piece. I don't need a report on what's going on in Jamaica. I know. I don't need a report on what happened to Malala. I know. So you're not reporting on the content. You are deciding, was the author successful or unsuccessful in persuading his or her audience. So that's your focus. So the research component should be able to help you analyze a bit more critically. It should also be able to provide you with a bit more research or a bit more expertise for your ideas. So the goals here are to establish expertise, but also to help you with your reasoning. So these take place in different countries, and those different countries have different laws. So those laws are what the basis for these problems are stemmed in. So what's going on in Syria is based on the Syrian laws. What happened in Pakistan was based on the Pakistani laws. What's going on in Jamaica is based on the Jamaican laws. So you may need to understand those a little bit more in order to understand why the situation occurred. So it will help you with the logos, it will help you with understanding the reason that it's taking place, and it may also help you with establishing expertise. So when I talk about expertise, I always think about, I'm physical, so I always think about a fight. So if I'm going into a fight, I like to watch UFC and stuff. So if I'm going into a fight and I'm going to go in a back alley and I'm going to beat somebody up, and I'm fighting a gang of people, I want to have my best support behind me. So I think of support. And I think of my son, because he's got a really deep voice. He's a really tall, gangly guy, but he's got a really deep voice. So if my son Coy is in the background and he says, hey, leave my mom alone, like he sounds really scary and intimidating, right? So he sounds scary and intimidating, but if he were to come out of the shadows, people are going to laugh. Because he is like 120 pounds, but he's 6 foot tall. So super, super skinny kid. He does not look scary. And his face, he's got a big head, so his face is like, oh no. And he laughs all the time. So no one could take him seriously unless he were in the shadows. But then I think about Mike Tyson. So if Mike Tyson's in the shadows, don't hurt her. Like, he's not going to sound very scary and intimidating. But if he comes out and you see him, yeah, he's going to be scary and intimidating. So I want the best support, and I'm going to present the best support in the best way. So I may present my son in the shadows with his scary and intimidating voice, but I may present Mike Tyson supporting me to make me look big and bad. So you have to think about using the experts wisely. You want to use them to benefit you. And that's what your authors, the authors that you're researching or you're learning about, that's what they have done as well. So you're going to use the research from others to support your ideas. We also talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary research. We won't touch on this very much, but primary is going to be the actual article. Secondary is going to be information that adds to what you're researching from that article. Tertiary is a criticism of that secondary information. So those are just the different layers. You will be using pieces from the virtual library. A couple of things that I want you guys to be aware of. The virtual library will eventually kick you into a .com. What does com mean? What do you think com means?
Communication.
Not communication. What? Not company. This is where you see ads, pop-ups, commercial. Okay. So .com stands for commercial. Commercial sites have to be paid for in some way. So those commercial sites that are paid for usually have some type of financial connection. Ladies, do you have a question? All right. So a .com is going to be a commercial site. So somebody has paid for that site. Now, when you guys go into the virtual library, you're going to start at an EDU, which stands for what? Education. The thing about educational websites, they usually link you to something else. They don't usually give you a lot of information up front. So this EDU, ivytech.edu, is going to eventually get you to ebscohost.com. That is a paid-for site by you. As students, you have paid your tuition, and your tuition in part goes to EBSCOhost. It's this big database, and we pay a lot of money for that. .coms are only allowed if it is in one of those databases. So you should never use a .com in my class, except for the databases. You might want to write that down. No .coms unless they are the databases. So what is net? What do you think net stands for?
Network.
Network. So it's a network of a group of some kind. So AT&T.net. It's the AT&T network. So networks typically put forth the information that they have paid for, but they don't usually have as much advertising on the page itself. So other outside sources haven't necessarily contributed to that. Networks usually just present information that they feel is valuable. So I don't want you guys using nets. No networks. No .com, no nets. Now, EDUs are okay to use at all points. So if you see an EDU, you can use that. Those are educational websites. Again, those are mostly going to link you to other websites. But if you come across an EDU with some information and you want to use that, that's acceptable. Gov, what does that stand for? Government. So no matter how you feel about the government, those are safer sources to use. So you don't have to ask about government sources. Government sources typically have to go through several processes. So the newest idiot, Mike Pence, he cannot just say, hey, I want to type something up here. I want to put something on the website. He can't just do it like that. He has to go through several processes. So that is, those are okay to use. Orgs. Okay. Most of the time they are organizations. They used to be pinned as origins. So they've changed it in the last probably 10 years. Orgs are sometimes okay to use. But those you always have to ask permission on. Orgs you have to ask permission. Govs and EDUs you can always use. Comms and nets you cannot use. And orgs you have to ask permission on before you use it. So don't use it and think, oh yeah, that should be permission, right? No. Ask first. So there are 2 hyperlinks here that will take you to Purdue OWL, and I have added a hyperlink into your Blackboard page. It talks a lot about research. but we're going to actually get into where we find that information. So we're going to go to the virtual library. This is where you guys are going to need to get into your computers. What's that?
111. 111.
You don't need to go into Blackboard. So the first thing that you're going to do is access the internet. Again, if you access Internet Explorer, you may get to a point where something doesn't work. So I would suggest using Firefox or using Google Chrome instead. You are going to access that and go to ivtech.edu. I'm going to show you guys the long way, and then I'll show you a shortcut. The reason I'm showing you the long way is because the shortcut doesn't always work. If the system is down, the shortcut won't work, and the long way will. So go to ivtech.edu, and then over here to the side, your pictures are going to be different. You're going to see current students, and you can arrow over down to library. You don't have to log into Campus Connect, you're just at ivtech.edu. What's that? If you just typed in ivtech.edu. Do you have any extenders? Now when you do this, you should see Kokomo. I want you guys to click on Kokomo under library. Anybody struggling with this? Okay, anybody struggling to get here? So this is the actual virtual library. There are a couple of things that I'm going to show you guys as soon as I get in there, but I am going to get in there myself. I will show you guys the shortcut as well. So the shortcut is to go to Campus Connect. And after you've logged in, you will see a tab that says Library. Now again, if Campus Connect is down, you will not be able to access that. So you will be able to go in the other direction that I showed you. So by going to ivtech.edu, going to current students, library, Kokomo, that will get you into the virtual library. Campus Connect is going to be down over break. They are going to shut down certain systems on certain days at certain times. And they have a schedule for it, but I'm not even going to waste time sharing the schedule with you because it's going to change. It usually changes. So as you go in, you may find that the system's not working. Try another way. Try another browser. Try another way. So just a couple of things here, and this is what I want you guys to pay really close attention to because this is where a lot of students really get hung up. About My Library will have hours for the LRC. It's going to have information, services that are available. Ask a librarian. I don't know who this librarian is, and I asked her a question like 3 years ago. She still hasn't responded, so don't even waste your time. Call the LRC. The help guide up here has a lot of really great resources. So if you click on help, you're going to see a thing called the assignment calculator. I always like to show you guys the assignment calculator because it will help you calculate what you need to do if you want to set some goals for yourself. So you got the assignment today, and the assignment is due
16.
the 1st. Yes. So you can calculate your schedule, and it will tell you step by step what you want to focus on. It will also give you resources in each of those areas that you can click on and find out more information. So if you're struggling with, let's say you're struggling with a thesis statement, you click on that and it will take you to a source for that. Now some of the stuff is not going to apply. You guys are not you're not choosing a topic. You already have a topic kind of chosen for you, so you wouldn't need that piece. So there are some of these pieces that you would need, some of these pieces that you wouldn't need. The other thing that I like here are the tutorials. They have some tutorials on getting into Ivy Life. If you take an online English 111 course, you have to do quizzes in here. They are actually kind of neat and they're kind of helpful. They give you a lot of hands-on work with getting in here. The one I want you guys to be really cautious of is the one called Citing Sources. So there is a plagiarism guide here. That's a great thing to look at. MLA and APA sample papers, great thing to look at. Example citations up here, great thing to look at. These citation creation tools are wrong. So if you use these creators, these citation creators, you are going to have incorrect information and you're going to get points taken off. So just know that and be aware of that before you try to use one of these. A few years ago, I had a sub for my classes, and I started seeing as the students were turning their papers in, they all had an extra piece of information that they didn't need, and I was wondering what's going on. This student, why do they have that there? That's nowhere near anything that they ever should have had. And I started seeing it with the second person, and then the fourth, and the fifth, and so on and so forth. And I realized that this was a pattern. So I contacted the sub, and he had showed them Noodle tools, and they had put the information in, and it had formatted it incorrectly. So they had points taken off because of that initially.
So that's all wrong then?
Yes, don't use this. The other thing that some of you may think, oh, I'm going to use this. Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, has a reference area. And they will say, put information in here and we'll do the reference for you. And then you can do in-text citations. It's wrong. So just know that if you use it, you're going to get points taken off. In that instance, it gives you the information, you copy and paste it over. That I can fix, I can tweak, and I can adjust, as long as it's not like hugely, grossly bad. But if you do the references in Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, I cannot change those. It locks it out, so I cannot edit those. So it will be wrong, and it will continue to be wrong. So just don't use those. I am going to show you guys some more about citations when we get to that area. I don't want you guys to focus on this now. Right now, what I want you to focus on, if you go back to the search and find, that is where we're going to focus. So if you click on search and find, you're going to see several different areas. So let's talk about each of these areas. When you guys get into some of your content courses, it might be best for you to search by subject. So I have an English degree and I have an education degree. When I was in my education classes, I went to by subject and I looked in education, and it gave me a bunch of databases that were really focused in on education. I went to literature if I was talking about one of my literary classes. I went to rhetoric or composition when I wanted to compose something. So by subject is going to have different fields that you may be working in. A to Z list. when you get into your areas, you may have an instructor who says, I only want you to use this database. Or you may find a database that you really like. ERIC is a database that I really like because it has educational journals. So I use that all the time. So I would go to the A to Z list and I would just go straight into that database because the information is right there and it's quicker and easier. The websites. This is a safer place for you to search for websites, but it is not completely safe. So you can't just click in here and think, I'm going to search something and it's going to be easy to find. Let's skip references for a minute and I'll show you why here in a minute. Audio visual. So with the argument essay that you guys do, you're going to have to incorporate a visual component. This is a really great place to go for visual components, for visual pieces. It also has audio clips, so if you have to later on do a presentation of some kind, this is a great place to go to get those audio clips. Books. Books are wonderful. But do you have time to read a bunch of books and decide if that's worth it for your sources? No. I don't know about you, but I don't have time to do that. So books are great for leisure, but they're really not good for research. It's also older because it had to go through the publication process. So books are I don't want you guys using this, and for most of your classes you won't use this. Most of the time you're going to use articles and reference information. So let's go first to the references section. So the reference section takes you to several different areas. These areas will focus on reference materials, encyclopedias, dictionaries, places that are going to give you information. For this assignment, most of you will want to use Britannica Online. So let's click into Britannica Online. Now, just like you would do with a search of some kind, you're going to put a keyword in at the search area. So if you wanted to find a recipe for chicken marsala, you would write chicken marsala, or you might write recipe for chicken marsala. So whatever keywords that you would use to do any kind of general search, you want to start with those terms. Keep in mind that you want to be specific and not too general, but you also don't want to be too specific. So if you say quick and easy recipe for chicken marsala, that may be too specific because chicken marsala usually takes a little bit more time. So you may just want to expand that to recipe for chicken marsala. But you don't want to say recipe for chicken, because then you're going to get too much stuff. So if you have too many results, then you want to isolate it a bit more. If you have not enough results or you have very narrow results, then you want to expand that a bit more. So remember what we did with Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel's piece. So at first we said, oh, well, do we want to write as our keyword, do we want to write the Holocaust? And when you do that, you get 463 results. And that's just in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So maybe instead of the Holocaust, I want to focus on what?
I saw it.
Okay, that would be the piece.
Bergen-Belsen, maybe?
Maybe I want to focus on Bergen-Belsen. So I go from 463 to 9. Maybe I want to focus on concentration camps. Now I have 390. So maybe I want to focus on concentration camps in the Holocaust. Okay, so there was nothing there. So if I just took out the word concentration, then I still get some results. I'm still going to get something. So once you get your results, if you see this quick idea here, this is kind of like what that abstract was. It gives you a little bit of detail that you can then decide, hey, I want this or I don't want this. If I'm looking at the camps during the Holocaust. I probably don't want anything from 1997. I don't need anything about Israel. United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So it's the museum memorial to the Holocaust located here. It was dedicated, blah, 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 blah. So maybe I click on this to find out a little bit more. When you use this one, it is going to highlight the words that you have in your keyword search. So you see that Holocaust is highlighted here, it's bolded. That's because it's in my search terms. So as I look through this, I see my author down here, and I see the information. I can read through this information fairly quickly. Reference information is fairly quick and easy to assess and look at. What is more complicated, if you guys go back to, go back to Campus Connect and go back to the database. If you go to articles, this area is going to be a bit more complicated. So let's talk about each of these areas, and I will show you what areas you might use more often. So for those of you who are planning to transfer to a 4-year, you will most likely be using EBSCOhost. Most 4-year universities use and buy EBSCOhost. I spent most of my academic career using Academic Search Premier. Academic Search Premier is the best of those databases. So EBSCOhost is really this large database, and within that database they have smaller databases. This is the service that you pay for from being a student. So EBSCOhost is one of those larger databases. Under it is Academic Search Premier. So this is the one that I like the most because it is easier to read and it gives you 4,500 titles. It gives you a lot of information. Those of you going into business areas, Business Source Premier is a good source for business-related issues. Any of you going into computer technology, computer and applied sciences, that's a great database. Health, any of you going into medical fields, this is okay to use, but I'm going to show you a better one. If you want to look at newspapers, these are more current, contemporary pieces. If you're going into psychology, the psych articles are also very helpful. This one, again, is the one that most people can use and get by with. This is what most 4-years will use. So if you're planning on transferring, you might want to use this. If you are planning on going into a medical field, any medically related field, including psychology, ProQuest is probably the best database for you to get started in. I will tell you that ProQuest has a lot of text, it has a lot of words, it has a lot of really complex stuff, and it uses single spacing, so it makes my eyes hurt. So it's the database that medically based programs use. There are nursing journals and then research libraries that you can use here. The cleanest of the databases is actually Gale. Gale is the cheapest, and it's the one that's used most often with high schools and middle schools. So Gale database has the Biography Resource Center, which has information about individuals. So if you wanted to research Anne Frank, you could go in here and you would type in Anne Frank's name and you're going to get a bunch of information about Anne Frank. It has the Health and Wellness Resource Center. This has general information about health topics. It also has the Opposing Viewpoints Resource Center. So when we get into the argument paper, we're really going to spend a lot of time in the Opposing Viewpoints Resource Center. It gives you controversial topics, it gives you hot topics, and it gives you both sides of those. Those of you who are going into business fields or legal fields of some kind, including criminal justice, LexisNexis is the area that you will maybe use, as well as JSTOR. These two are the ones that criminal justice fields and businesses often use. The others are okay, but I wouldn't even recommend messing with those. So let's click into Academic Search Premier, and I want to show you how these databases function. So just like with the other databases, just like with when you search for something on Google, you want to make sure that your keywords are significant. So remember that when we were looking at those keywords that we were putting in our abstract, we had to be specific but not too specific. We had to be general but not too general. So we typed in, I saw Anne Frank die. If I search for that, I'm going to get the piece itself. This is actually the story. This is where I got the story from. Now, let's say I want to do what we did before with Bergen-Belsen. So I want to start with the Holocaust. And when I press enter, I've got over 8,000 results. Way too much. So instead, I can go back and I can refine that. So maybe I want to talk about Bergen-Belsen. Now I have 39 results. That's something a bit more manageable. If you still play around with the results a little bit, play around with the keywords, and you're still not finding enough information, you can do the advanced search, and that will give you some additional parameters. You can look for specific things. So maybe you look for the abstract. Maybe you look for the geographic terms. Maybe you look for the author. You can add in information so you find two things. So if I look for Bergen-Belsen and Irma Sonnenberg-Menkel, I get nothing. So they're not recognizing this. So if I say in the all text and then search, well, they're just really messing me up today, aren't they? Maybe I do all text for both. There it is. So you have to kind of play around with this. You have to figure things out. Let me explain this in relatable terms. Okay, so I have friends, and when my friends start dating people, I'm like, all right, what's his name? And I'm Googling the crap out of this person. So I'm looking for information on this person. So I'm going to access all of the sources that I can find. But there are millions of John Smiths in the world.
Right.
So if I want to find John Smith from Kokomo, then I need to add Kokomo. But there are a lot of John Smiths in Kokomo. So I have to start digging, and I have to start finding, maybe I access Facebook. And then I find the picture of him. And then I find where he works. And then I go back to Google and I add in that keyword there. I add in something else. I always go to mycase.in.gov, so I check their police record. See what their divorce record looks like.
Oh, wow.
mycase.in.gov. Great place to go. So I'm going in there and I'm searching for that person. I'm also looking, and Facebook pages tell a lot about a person. So sometimes you find one source that gives you a wealth of information. So my friend Deanna was dating this guy. So I was Googling the crap out of this dude, and I find his ex-wife.
Oh.
And then his ex-wife is friends with my to-be husband. So then I'm accessing his Facebook account so I can find out more about this guy who's dating this ex-wife. And then we're looking for his son to see if he really had a son. And we're looking on Facebook. This kid's in high school. So we jumped over on Instagram and we found the kid. So you have to access what you can, and you have to figure out different methods. If this is not working, expand your keywords. If this isn't working, go back to another database and start looking. So expand your keywords as necessary, narrow your keywords as necessary, and sometimes it's about investigating a topic and then finding more information that you can use to narrow it down. The other thing I like about Academic Search Premier, and most of these in EBSCOhost, when you type in a topic, down here, you are going to see the title of the piece. If you click on the title of the piece, it's going to give you the author information, the source information, the type, it's going to give you this information. You can actually even listen to the piece. It's way more fun to listen to it in a British accent, so I suggest that. But you can listen to the piece. Sorry.
History matters. After 70 years, a visual record of the liberation of Belsen has been restored.
Okay, so that's way more fun than the English accent. So you can read it, you can listen to it, all by accessing that information. The other really great thing about this, if you click on the PDF, you're going to see what it actually looked like in print. I like pictures. I like to see the page numbers. I like to see all of these components. So the PDF is usually nicer to look at. The other thing that you want to be aware of, if you click over here, since I'm giving it to me, you're going to see the abstract. Remember those abstracts where you wrote a summary of your paper? That's the same thing. This is a summary of the paper. So you don't actually have to go in and read the entire paper, but you can just hover over here and you can find out what that essay is about. So this is about German diarist Anne Frank, escaping Nazi persecution, family. This is about Anne Frank. So do I want this if I'm talking about I saw Anne Frank die? I don't necessarily need this. Maybe I need something else. Maybe I need something about Bergen-Belsen. So if you can see it, if you can't, you may need to click on it in order to get an abstract. If it's really short, oftentimes they don't have an abstract for it because you can just read through it very quickly. So for you guys, for your assignment, you guys are first going to watch the pieces. Now I want you to watch the 3 pieces and determine which piece you really want to use. So figure out what your first choice is, but I want you to email me with your first, second, and third choices. That is going to be due by 11:59 on Saturday.
Your email?
Yes. If you don't email me, you're going to get stuck in a group. So you need to email me with your choice. I will tell you, I have a student who hated his choice last semester because he didn't send me the email like he was supposed to. So he hated it. He really struggled with the entire process and the project itself. So make sure you're emailing me. I need you to wait for your response, the email that I respond back to you, because I'm going to tell you which piece that you're actually going to research. And then you're going to find 2 pieces of additional research that you will bring in printed or electronic copies of on Monday, March 16th. So the Monday after spring break.
2 pieces, you say?
Yes, at least 2 pieces.
So we'll find out what group we in when we get back in class?
No, you're going to find out in an email.
Oh, okay.
Just wait for the response.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, goodness.
Other questions? If you're struggling with this, then you need to practice. You need to get in there, you need to change your keywords around, you need to see if that's going to work, see if something else will work. Investigate, use this as an investigative process because that's exactly what it is. So pretend that you're looking for, you're stalking your friend's new girlfriend or new boyfriend. So get in there and really play around with it a little bit. The process right now may seem daunting, it may seem like a lot, but once you get in there and play around with it a little bit, then you're going to start discovering certain things that make it easier. You can use any of the databases that you want. I would suggest that you guys use a reference piece and that you go in and maybe use an article as well. All right. Enjoy your spring break.
Yeah, one question. The email, is that through Campus Connect or Blackboard?
Either one will come to me as long as it gets to me. Okay. See you guys in a few weeks.
When you were here.
Did you say you have your wedding next week?
It's not until May. I planned it for break. Like I'm not going to be working break. No, but we're doing some planning stuff.